Hello, hello, hello there, everyone. How are you doing? Patricia Hayes here, and welcome to Coffee Time Career Chat. We are off to a little bit of a bumpy start on this holiday morning, President's Day, and it'll be all right, right? Kids are home when they're not supposed to be. You got refreshers on computers. It's all the fun stuff. Anyway, I'm super glad to be here today, and I want to welcome you to Coffee Time. My name's Patricia Hayes. For those of you who have not joined before, I am an attorney by training, and I'm an executive advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist. And all that means is I love helping people who are trying to transition to the next level in their career or business and want to do so very purposefully, authentically, and to do it aligned with their values. So that's what I love to do. And making sure that people are engaged with their most valuable asset besides their health, which is their professional relationships. And today we are going to do a little bit of a flashback. Most of you may not even have had a chance to engage in this. So I'm excited about being able to share this content, or I should say reshare, because it is the Leadership Legacies series that I did. I started almost 5 years ago, and I did it originally for in honor of President's Day. And I went and did some research to honor and recognize the work and contributions of four presidents in terms of their leadership capacity, not politics, whatever like that. And also, which then evolved into a workshop presentation that I did for quite some time. So it's one of my favorites, and I've been working on getting it evolved to a women's leadership legacy. I'm going to try and pull that off for March in honor of the celebration of Women's Month. So we'll see. Let's see if we can get this done first, and then I'll work on that as well. So, in this leadership legacies conversation, we talked about in the terms of bold leadership, and the four presidents that I originally did the research on and included in this workshop were George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Delany. Roosevelt, I can't get it out, and Barack Obama. And the reason why is because each of them, when I just really kind of narrow it down, I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of others that could have been involved, but when I was narrowing it down to who had this greatest impact during some very turbulent and challenging times, and these are the four that it really just kind of naturally narrowed down to. And this is just a piece, just a taste of the of the masterclass, much less the workshop, right? The masterclass was originally about 3 hours long, and when I would do the workshop, it's about an hour. So we're going to cover some stuff in about, I don't know, 25 minutes. So I want you to hold on and let's get really engaged here. One of the first things to talk about and ask is, what makes leadership bold? And when I was working through that, because there's all kinds of, how we identify leadership and how we've engaged in it, and the terms attached to it. But for me, the level of it being how bold it was is what really focused in here. And the definition, when we're talking about just being bold in general, is about not hesitating or being fearful in the face of actual or possible danger or rebuff, about being courageous and daring. I mean, those are a lot of powerful words altogether, right? So when you think about it in those terms, one of the things is, if you're talking about a leader, remember, I've always talked about leadership in terms of not just a title. It's about behavior. It's how you engage, support others, get that trust. And you'll see a lot of that when we talk about this in this conversation, what these what these presidential leaders had to deal with. And so when you put those two things together about working to build some trust and create some confidence in order to take people to a next level, to take them to a goal, to achieve a goal, but to do it in spite of, right? Really, that's what the boldness is about, to do it in spite of dangerous situations, to do it in spite of, the retribution or disagreement, right? So just think about it in those terms when we're having this conversation, and that will always just kind of go back, especially when we get to the end when we talk about what does it look like for you to be a bold leader. So there were three kind of big areas that we kind of looked at in reviewing the four presidents that I mentioned, and it was how they overcame their mindset obstacles, how they were setting goals and big dreams during their times, and how they were masters at building strategic relationships. And we're not going to get into the details of each one of them, but just really quickly, I mean, in terms of the mindset obstacles for George Washington, it was about, being the first. He was the first president and the first of so many things. And we know whenever you're the first of anything, there's always going to be, someone to challenge it. There's going to be questioning. And it can get very wearing on you, right? Very challenging in and of itself, because it's the first time. And so those were the mindset obstacles he had to deal with. With Lincoln, one of the things that he had to face was, being charged with not being qualified to even be president. Go read, go do a little bit of reading. It was fascinating stuff, because he didn't come up through the ranks, right? He didn't follow the normal pathway. There's lots to be said about that. He didn't follow the normal pathway of what a president would look like, or the experiences they would have. He was self-taught as a lawyer. He wasn't that good looking image. He didn't have that image thing. There were lots of things where basically he was just basically accused of not being qualified to even pursue the position. And so that affected his confidence. Now, FDR, he was different, because the stuff that we read about, just basically said he was like, confidence was not lacking for him, right? Franklin Roosevelt did not lack confidence. However, one of the things that really wasn't known that well back then was that he had a debilitating illness. He was confined to a wheelchair. And so that does affect, his mental condition when you're physically limited in what you could do and how people might perceive you, right? And then finally, on the mindset piece, was Barack Obama, who again came back with dealing with being the first African American president in the United States history, and all of the weight that came with that, right? Now, when we're talking about the second thing about setting those goals, setting big, clear goals and big dreams, really each of them had all of these things. Washington was trying to lead a brand new country. Abraham Lincoln was trying to lead a country through the Civil War and dealing with slavery. FDR was trying to lead a country in the midst of a depression a war. And Barack Obama was leading a country as the first African American president in the midst of approaching a serious recession that hadn't existed in years. So all of these things is, well, what can you do in the midst of all that, right? Because they were all still trying to achieve great big goals, to achieve big dreams that otherwise would have been seemed impossible. And so there you are. And so, for example, like I said, Washington was setting up a country. Lincoln was trying to pull people together, and we'll talk about that in a second, to address the issues of slavery. Roosevelt was trying to get the confidence of the country in the midst of a war, and Obama was trying to do, one of his big dreams was to institute uh, national health care when it had been tried before and gotten to the brink of it, but not been successful yet, right? So there you are. The point being that in the midst of difficult situations, challenges to your mindset, and a whole lot of other going on, that you can still set big goals. You can still set big dreams and do whatever it takes, whatever it needs to happen in order to bring them to fruition, right? And it's not always a pretty a pretty way of doing it. People think it's just, oh, it's so easy. And what? No, go read the history on any of these, and you will be fascinated by details that you don't get in the regular history classes. So go learn for yourself. The third piece that I mentioned was building strategic relationships, and each of these men were masters at facilitating relationships, like masters. I mean, Lincoln literally had a whole book that was written by a world-class historian that's called Team of Rivals. And it literally is about the fact of how he pulled together and reached out to diverse people who, and by diverse, I mean diverse in politics and backgrounds, but who did not agree on the most pressing issue of the day, which was slavery. And Washington, was doing similar things when he first started, was pulling together again because he was the first president. So you got to pull people in who don't agree in order to make the goal of setting up a new democracy work. And then you've got FDR, who again was faced with, doing all of this in the middle of a war. And one of his things was he started, the fireside chat, and I label that as the live of Facebook, the Facebook live of the time, because that's what it had. It really listened to radio and being able to talk directly to the people to try to instill some confidence and to build them up. And Barack Obama, who again, master facilitator, master community builder and leader. Like that's how he got to where he was engaging in community building at a very grassroots level, and then bringing that up to the big stage, working on for the presidency. So those are things that were really key. It wasn't just about, quote, having relationships. It was about how to build them in a very strategic way, and utilizing their facilitation skills, their communication skills, which were crucial to their success and being able to pull off the things that all four of them did. So, I can always talk about building strategic relationships all day long. That's my favorite topic, but we won't spend any more time there. So let's dig in. And there are 6 bold leadership nuggets that came from exploring each one of these presidents. And we're going to get through that. And then we're going to make this a part 2. And next week, we're going to talk about, revisiting a little bit about the bold leadership, but then talking about bold leader moments and what those look like and how you can engage them in the roles and the things that you do as you build up your leadership skills. All right. Okay. So the bold leadership nuggets that arose from this research and this presentation was, first of all, that you have to be a leader in your own life, no matter what things look like around you. So crucial, because chaos can literally be reigning around you. You have to be able to step up and lead and serve regardless of all of that. You have to be a leader in your own life first. And so many times people are trying to be a leader out there, but they're not being a leader here. It starts within and it grows. And you may have to, do both at the same time, but the point is the leadership growth has to be going on inside as well. And you have to be willing to take criticism, to explore new avenues, to face difficult situations, and to do it knowing that I may not have all the answers, but I'm going to pursue them and try my best, right? And that means building up not just confidence, because it seems so cliche, but the resilience. That's the word I'm going to use, the resilience to be able to be a leader of one within yourself. Because again, you may not have the support that you would like around you externally. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is to be willing to assess the situation and step away. This is so important. And this came up in particular with George Washington, because the reality was that George Washington, because he was also a military man, right? So it would have been very easy for him to go ahead and take that third term and keep going, because he was well loved, he had led well, and people were willing to continue. The thing is, he felt strongly about the role of democracy and building it up, and it was not to create a aristocracy. It was not to create a I'm losing my words, but it was not to become, to create some type of, mini dictatorship. That's the word I'm looking for. And that very much could have happened. There was nothing blocking that from happening for him at that time. But when you are a leader who has respect for the bigger picture, he knew that it was not wise for him to continue down that road. It would have been setting a poor precedent for the future, and he stepped away. And that takes a lot of strength, right? Think about those leaders in your life, whether it's professionally or personally, who were faced with certain situations and they walked away from it or stepped away. And some people didn't understand, right? They're like, well, why didn't they do that? And they might have thought, excuse me, that they were abandoning something, when in actuality, think about it in terms of they might have actually been supporting the real goal. That requires a whole shift in a mindset when you go back and review some situations. So I want you to think about that, consider that, is where have you observed leaders who looked like they were abandoning a situation, when in actuality, maybe they were stepping away to allow the next thing to happen. Okay. That's rich, and there's so much in that one. We could talk about that one forever. Okay, number 3, the third bold leadership nugget is you want to take action despite apparent difficulties and obstacles. This is the one that seems so simple and so obvious, but it's absolutely the thing that will trip people up the most, because you will see the challenge, you can see the obstacles, and then be like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that, right? Taking action, even with those things in view, that's tough. And not everyone is actually capable of taking action within sight of obstacles and challenges and those difficulties. And that's not a slight at anyone. It's just the truth. It is the truth when you can see folks, because this is not the same as making a deliberate decision to step away from something for the betterment of the next level, right? That's the last thing that we were talking about. This is, I see the challenge, I see a difficulty, and there's a particular action that needs to be taken in order to overcome it or to plow through it or whatever, and deciding, I'm not doing that. But leaders are going to figure out a way to do it in spite of, right? There's that in spite of piece again. Remember when we talked about bold leadership, in spite of. And so that's something to consider, because again, it's easy to say and probably one of the most difficult things to actually do. That was number 3. Number 4, build your support team for what they can contribute, not for their agreement, um, and for their differing thoughts. This clearly comes straight from the issues that Lincoln was dealing with, where that's another thing that, all people in leadership roles are not able to translate that to true leadership, because it means you will have to listen to people, ideas, thoughts that don't align with what you ultimately want to put in place. Now, do you have to agree with everything? No. No, you do not. However, there is value in pulling people together to get that insight, to show that level of respect. And then, as the leader, to be able to make that decision, take that action, in spite of the difficulty or obstacle that may be presented by the opposing party, right? Do you see how those things just link together? So it's not an either or. So many times people think that it's an either or because they're treating leadership like it's a dictatorship all the time. And it's like, well, I'm the boss, so you have to do what I say. That's not leadership. That's not leadership. Telling someone you have to do what I say is not leadership. And it takes another level of growth. Remember, we talked about being, some internal leadership, to be able to receive, or even to ask, forget receiving, but even to ask someone with a contrarian viewpoint to engage, and then to listen, and then to determine what things are of value that you can then incorporate into what it is you're trying to achieve, or the role that you're trying to fulfill, whatever that may be. Okay. Again, absolutely takes practice. It takes skill. It's not something for the faint of heart, because sometimes it can seem to get a little personal, and it's not always about that. That's another point about leadership. Like, sometimes you have to step outside of yourself in order to hear some of these things and remember what the long-term goal is, right? Okay, that was number 4. Number 5, don't be afraid. So we're talking about the bold leadership nuggets. Don't be afraid to take a huge, bold step to achieve your goals. Yeah. It is an element. I try to stay away from it, but it is absolutely an element of do it anyway. And even maybe a little bit of doing it scared, but taking that step, that's big, that's bold. Sometimes you get to that point where it's just necessary and it's got to be done if you're actually going to achieve the goal, right? So it's having the resilience and confidence to take the step anyways, and be willing to deal with the results of taking that action. All right, that's number 5. Number 6, here's the last one. Don't be overcome with overwhelm, no matter how dire the situation. Wow, this one, so powerful, because there are so many things that can be going on at one time that will overwhelm even the strongest people. And it can be like, I can't do this anymore. I gotta go. But when leaders are in place and dealing with situations like this, it's a matter of managing that internal component again, acknowledging that the situation may be difficult, acknowledging that it's overwhelming. So it's not trying to ignore it, right? It's actually acknowledging it and then bringing it into focus so that you're not personally overcome by all of that. But then can most of the time having to break it down into pieces that you can manage while you're in the midst of a difficult situation. Okay? So there we are. I know that is a fast synopsis of only half of this workshop. But I just wanted to be able to share them and toss them out there because these factors and these elements are so true still today. Doesn't matter that it was hundreds of years ago where some of these things were taking place, or as recently as within the last, I don't know, how long has it been now? It doesn't seem like that long, 10 or 15 years. The core values and factors are still very much true. And so when you're looking at not just leadership, but bold leadership and how that can help provide direction for you today in your career and in your business, I encourage you to take a look at that. And I'm going to ask you the question today that I'm going to ask again next week, which is, are you a bold leader? And where can you act more boldly in your personal and professional life? Those are the thoughts for today to share with you. I'd love to get your input. Let me know what you think about it. I'm pretty sure I have access to I definitely have access to the workshop, but the recordings, if someone should be interested, and maybe we'll pull it up, we'll see. Or I'll re-record them and republish them. So thanks again for joining. I'm so excited about bringing this great month of February to a close soon and being able to start fresh again March 1st. If there's something you need that you need some support with, reach out, hit me up in the DMs. I'm happy to set up a brief conversation with you. And if I'm not the one to be able to help you make it happen, we'll find the right person. Okay. Take care, everyone. And I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye.